Hello, and welcome to our very first North America Women in Tech podcast series. This is your host, Leah Rollman, head of DE&I for North America, joining you from Charlotte, North Carolina. We often hear a lot of discussion around organizations wanting to improve their diversity. And while yes, it is important to have diverse representation throughout all levels of a company, dynamic organizations understand that it is equally, if not more important, to focus on creating an inclusive environment to unleash the benefits of a truly diverse workforce. So what exactly is inclusion and why is it so important? Inclusion in the workplace occurs when everyone feels safe, valued, is treated fairly and with respect, and has the same opportunities to progress and achieve success, both personally and professionally, within an organization. In an inclusive environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging, diversity often flourishes. It is generally the how of inclusion that represents the biggest challenge for many leaders. In this series, we are going to explore this topic and hear directly from our North America female Endavans, who will be providing their unique perspectives on the importance of allyship and sponsorship in the workplace, and how we as an organization, and you individually as leaders, can help champion women and other marginalized employees by becoming an effective ally or sponsor and helping promote a culture of belonging and inclusivity at Endava. So what is allyship and sponsorship? If you Google these terms, you're likely to find a multitude of definitions, and you'll find these terms are often used in conjunction with each other. Allyship can best be described as individuals actively advancing the interests and inclusion of marginalized and underrepresented individuals, and sponsorship involves using existing influence and networks to make important connections and/or advancements for those individuals. Allies often use sponsorship as a method to elevate those from underrepresented groups. But let's hear from our speakers on what they think about allyship and sponsorship and their impact in the workplace. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Rachel Utter, and I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. My current role with Endava is as a Learning and Organization Development Specialist. I joined the company with the Level acquisition and have a little over 4 years of experience. I spent most of my childhood growing up with my twin sister and younger brother in northeastern Pennsylvania, but we also lived in Georgia and Washington State when I was little. I received my master's degree in the field of industrial organizational psychology and started out my career in human resources before transitioning to learning and organization development more recently. For fun, I like to read, write, make my own clothes, and hang out with my cockatiel, Peaches.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Rachel, in your opinion, what does a strong ally or sponsor look and or sound like to you?
When someone does research on their own time about others' identities and experiences, that's when I know they're committed to understanding the people around them. A strong and committed ally is more purposeful and thoughtful in their approach to being in a community with others and finding ways to care for those people. I feel that you should make it your personal responsibility to learn at least the foundations of your coworkers' and friends' identities. A strong ally also understands where and how they have privilege in our society and tries to use those instances to help others. You can help call out discriminatory behavior in others when you see it, or recognize and call out advertisements that reinforce stereotypes. For my career, I've seen a lot of help through allies highlighting some of my achievements. Getting that recognition from people more senior than me helped to demonstrate my knowledge and talent to others, which helped my credibility for future projects. The most important thing for me, though, for an ally to do is to make sure that you check in with people to see what support looks like for them. Everyone wants to be supported in different ways, so unfortunately there's no one-size-fits-all formula for being a good ally. What feels good for one person may not do the same for someone else. And if you make mistakes, just own them and ask how you can do better in the future.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Alicia, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hello, my name is Alicia Christini. I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina. I joined Endava through the Level acquisition, where I currently serve as head of learning and organization development for our North America team.
Alicia, from your perspective, how has allyship or sponsorship positively impacted your career thus far?
When I think about allyship and how it has positively impacted my career, I think about a quote. I'm not sure who it's by, but I'll repurpose it here. And that is to say that allyship is about saying my name in a room full of opportunities. I don't see allyship as very different from genuine leadership in that it's about lifting up others. To be an ally means to be a good leader and make space for others to step into their fullest expression. If as a leader you can recognize the privilege that holding such a role brings, then you're one step closer to being an ally. My challenge for all of us is to lean into the discomfort because therein lies the growth, and if we're intentional, transformation.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Julia, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Julia Levitt and I live in Manhattan, New York. I joined Endava almost 3 years ago as a lead gen straight out of college. I worked within the payments sales team at Endava for about 2 years before moving over to the financial service and payments team as a business analyst. I grew up out on Long Island and moved to New Jersey at about 12 before ultimately landing myself back in New York, where I currently am today. I went to SUNY Binghamton with the intention of majoring in biomedical engineering and applying to med school, just like all of my older cousins and brother had. But after my first year, I took an accounting course and quickly realized that the world of finance and banking piqued my interest a lot more. Every day, I am more and more grateful for being here at Endava and the opportunities it is providing me.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Julia, in your opinion, what groups are most in need of allyship or sponsorship, and why do you think that is?
Being new to the industry and even the working world in general, it's become very apparent that the more allies you have, the farther you can go. And it's not just because you have someone speaking up for you in the boardrooms or to your bosses, but it's because they are there to speak to you. When I was sent the email to be a participant of this podcast, I was overjoyed and told anyone and everyone I could. But as the deadline was quickly approaching, my imposter syndrome was rapidly rising. If it wasn't for the allies and sponsors of my world, I don't think you'd be hearing my voice today. As I mentioned, I'm new to all of this, and because of that, all I kept thinking was why I deserve to be speaking here today on this podcast when there were tons of other incredible women at Endava. What helped me overcome this imposter syndrome was taking a step back and seeing how my peers treated me. They treated me with respect, dignity, and as an equal. To them, it didn't matter how much or little experience I had. So why should I let it impact me and my opportunities? Sometimes being an ally is as simple as treating others the way you would want to be treated. If you came up with an idea, would you want to be acknowledged for it? If you went out of your way to help, would you like to be thanked? If you're trying your best, would you like to be appreciated? I think most of us, if not all, would answer these questions with a resounding yes. So, despite what many think, allyship doesn't have to be some over-the-top action, but sometimes it's really as simple as treating others the way you would like to be treated, no matter their gender, race, or age.
Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hey everyone, my name is Michelle Tefano and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I joined Endava as a part of the Level acquisition and started back in 2019, so I'm about to celebrate my 4-year anniversary with Level and now Endava. Uh, in the organization, I am an industry consultant, and right now I'm the product owner for the redesign of our global website and also support the mobility, AGU, and sales team with some of their go-to-market work and other sort of workshops. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I also went to college at the University of Cincinnati. I moved down to Charlotte in 2012 after I graduated and joined Teach for America, which, for those that are unfamiliar, it's a teaching program that specifically goes into low-income communities to close the education gap. So I taught high school English for 5 years, and after that, I made a transition into the technology consulting world, and here I am now. Some of my favorite things to do in Charlotte are to work out. I belong to a HIIT or high intensity interval training gym, which I really love. I also bought a house last year, so I spend a lot of time decorating and making it a home. I also have most of my family living nearby. So my parents moved from Cincinnati to Lake Wylie, South Carolina, which is really close to Charlotte. And during the summer, we get to spend times out on my parents' boat at the pool. Generally, just get to spend a lot of time with my family, which is really nice.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey this far. Michelle, in your opinion, what behaviors should an effective ally start or stop doing?
In my mind, there are 3 behaviors that are really crucial to being an ally. The first being empathy, the second, advocacy, and the third, celebration and recognition. So there's a quote from Dr. Brene Brown that I really like. She says, "Empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection." In my mind, having empathy means that although you may not have that exact experience, you still are willing to understand where they're coming from. Whereas sympathy is more of feeling bad for that person, and that's not what any marginalized group wants. It's really important to recognize that there are unique experiences and disparities that women face in the workplace. As soon as you can really show empathy and understand where that person's coming from, you're an effective ally. From there, it's important to take it a step further and advocate for that person. So, something that's really important to me is always having a group of people that I can count on to advocate for me. Although I feel I am a really strong self advocate, having individuals that also see the value that you bring to an organization is really crucial. And the last behavior that I think is so crucial to being an effective ally is celebrating and recognizing the success of that individual. This can be as easy as posting a message in a channel like Kudos, where you publicly give recognition for that person's success. Another example would be making sure that that person gets credit for the hard work that they did. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've created documentation or worked on something that was important for a project and received no recognition for it. To that other person, maybe it wasn't a big deal, but to me, it was an opportunity to shine, and I didn't get that opportunity. I challenge everyone to take a moment and think about how they can be a more effective ally. How can you show more empathy for a teammate that has a different life experience than you? How can you advocate for a teammate and make sure that they're considered for an opportunity? How can you celebrate their successes on the project? And how can you recognize the great work that they do every day?
Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Vicki, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Vicki Littauer, and I live in Spring Hill, Tennessee, which is 30 miles south of Nashville. I joined Endava via the Level acquisition and have been with the company for just under 2.5 years and currently serve as a delivery manager in the North America Banking AGU. As a delivery manager, I help support client account growth and manage Endava delivery teams on a few of our financial services clients. I don't have just one hometown. We moved about every 7 years during my childhood due to my dad's career in banking. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and spent half my childhood growing up just up the road in Franklin, Tennessee, and the other half in Cumming, Georgia. We relocated to Midlothian, Virginia right before I entered high school, which ultimately led me to attend Virginia Tech, where I earned my bachelor's degree in business information technology. Immediately upon graduating, I kicked off my IT consulting career in our nation's capital, and I've been in consulting ever since. I married the boy next door. I've known my husband since I was 14, and we have 3 young kids, an 8-year-old son in 3rd grade and 4-year-old twin girls who will be entering kindergarten later this year. We also have one dog, a pit bull named Clyde. When I'm not busy shuffling kids to and from practices and helping with homework, I love to read on my porch, and in the fall, you can find me in front of the TV watching the back-to-back college football champs. Go Dogs!
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Vicki, in your opinion, what behaviors should an effective ally start or stop doing?
Nominated. Allyship and sponsorship haven't always been prevalent in my career. There are times where I've felt isolated, misunderstood, and held back from opportunities because I am a woman and a working mom at that. When I've had a strong ally and sponsor, it has made all the difference in my career. It has made me feel inspired, heard, and valued. Having a strong ally and sponsor has helped me to reach my career goals and helped me recognize my impact and the difference I have and can continue to make when I can't always see it clearly myself. The strong allies and sponsors in my life have helped me to aspire to even more, despite there not being many or any in those positions that are women. For me, a strong and impactful ally or sponsor actively listens, seeks to understand my perspective and situation, versus assuming they know how I feel or what I want or need. An impactful ally and sponsor acknowledges and understands that allyship and sponsorship isn't a one size fits all. They put in the time to get to know me as a person and meet me where I'm at, because my needs have and will continue to evolve, and my needs probably don't match those to my left and my right. Allyship and sponsorship is not forcing me into a predetermined model or attempting to change me. It's recognizing my value and providing space for me to be my authentic self. It's helping instill confidence and providing opportunity and growth in a way that harnesses my strengths and challenges me in a way that can yield success. The most impactful allies and sponsors are authentic and genuine and see sponsorship as mutually beneficial and rewarding.
Thank you so much, Vicki, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Claire, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, my name is Claire Mannion. I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a learning and organization development specialist, and I joined Endava in June of 2022. Prior to that, I worked as an organizational transformation consultant. I also have a background in research and really enjoyed conducting qualitative research studies on talent development topics earlier in my career. I was so excited to join the learning and organization development team here at Endava to continue to help people learn and grow within and beyond their professional roles. I grew up in Bel Air, Maryland, just a little bit north of Baltimore, and then I spent 4 years in Columbia, South Carolina as a proud Gamecock at the University of South Carolina. After graduation, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area for a few years to start my career. I loved being closer to family, but didn't love the winters there, and eventually moved back to the Carolinas to call Charlotte home. Outside of work, I love to spend time exploring the local food scene, traveling to visit friends and family, walking or hiking with my dog, and supporting all of my favorite sports teams, especially South Carolina football and women's basketball.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Claire, in your opinion, why is allyship and or sponsorship critical in the workplace, and how does it impact culture?
I think allyship and sponsorship allow employees to feel empowered so they can bring their whole selves to work. Choosing to be an ally or a sponsor means choosing to see a person where they are, for who they are, and encouraging that person to shine through in the workplace. And while the bigger celebrations and opportunities for public recognition are helpful and important, it can't stop there. The day-to-day, behind-the-scenes moments of inclusivity need to be consistently ingrained in our culture. To me, this can be seen in team dynamics, interactions in meetings, and relationships with management. Whether it's asking someone for their opinion in a meeting when they otherwise might have chosen not to speak up, or stepping in to support someone who isn't being treated fairly, allyship and sponsorship contribute to our culture of inclusion, openness, and trust. And that culture helps us to build high-performing teams. We all benefit from the impacts of allyship and sponsorship because unique perspectives enrich our work and the service we provide to clients. I also think this type of empowerment needs to happen at all levels of the organization to be effective and truly integrated into the organizational culture. If leaders aren't reinforcing the right behaviors, it doesn't create the culture for others to model either. And at the same time, no employee should feel like they need to reach a certain level of tenure or responsibility to feel seen, heard, understood, and valued. We all bring a unique contribution to our roles just by showing up with our full identities. I'm proud to be a part of an organization that is committed to growth in this area because there are always opportunities to learn and improve.
Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Rachel Hernandez and I live in Santa Cruz, California. I joined Endava as part of the Level acquisition and have been with the company since August 2018. I'm head of the project delivery management and analysis disciplines, which means that all of the project managers, the scrum masters, and a lot of the BAs in our location are a part of my team. I grew up in both the UK and Hong Kong, coming to the UK permanently when I was about 10 years old. I studied languages in university, both Spanish and Mandarin Chinese, and then kind of moved about a bit geographically for some internships and my job, which was all within the kind of tech space, and they all had a PM slant on them as well. And then I had a stint in the Royal Air Force before settling into IT consulting as a project manager. And then I moved to the US to marry my now husband. And Level was the first job I had once I got my green card, and here I still am.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Rachel, in your opinion, why is allyship and/or sponsorship critical in the workplace, and how does it impact culture?
I love how much more focus there is now on diversity, equity, and inclusion, even than when I first joined the workforce. However, I feel like the fact that allyship and sponsorship are still so critical in workplaces these days shows us how far we still have to go. Being in a minority, like being a woman in tech, and having someone as your ally who can bring your voice and viewpoint into situations that you wouldn't necessarily get access to is incredibly valuable and brings us closer to a workplace culture where we can all thrive together instead of at the expense of anyone. I've never asked anyone to officially be my sponsor or ally, but reflecting back, I have been fortunate enough to have had a couple of managers who I knew had my back. They would truly listen to me, and I know they advocated for me, which I consider big parts of allyship and for which I'll always be grateful. In turn, I use the modest power that I've accumulated here and throughout my career to be an ally for others where I see those gaps and promoting psychological safety wherever I am. For me, this always feels like a work in progress, though, and I think it's important to realize that you can't just call yourself an ally and then poof, the work is done. If you're not careful, that can actually take you down quite a destructive path where trust is further eroded and the workplace culture can become even more exclusive. Instead, we need allies to not only be aware of marginalized groups, but also the barriers that they face, the issues that matter to them, and the perspectives that are different from our own, which I know sounds really daunting and it's not easy or a quick win, but it starts by talking to each other, even more importantly, listening.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Zoya, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Zoya Lieberman, and I live in Los Angeles, California. After 20 years of directional consulting, I joined Endava a little over a year ago as a senior industry consultant as part of the financial services and payments team here in North America. I grew up in the country that no longer exists, Soviet Union, in a beautiful city that everyone knows today as Kyiv, capital of Ukraine. After moving to Los Angeles as a teenager and graduating from high school, I earned 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Southern California, go Trojans, and an MBA from Pepperdine, go Waves. I'm also a certified treasury professional, and I've spent most of my career working with business and commercial product teams at various financial institutions. As a mom of 3 boys, I have limited time for myself, so whatever little time I do have, I like to spend on travel, wine tasting, going to the theater, attending college football games, and discovering all the little pleasures that life has to offer.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Zoya, in your opinion, how can one turn allyship into action?
This is a complex question, and in my opinion, is not easy to answer it as I'm in the middle of my career journey and I don't have a proper perspective yet. After all, we really need to look back and see at the end of it all who had the biggest impact on our careers and who was our biggest ally. So if I were to look back at the teachable moment in my career, I can honestly say that I have not had many role models or meaningful sponsorships. Instead, I had to learn a lot of things on my own, on trial and mistakes. I had to build my own professional network, and I had to build my own brand, and all of that has to be done from the ground up. And the most rewarding part of it is actually seeing professional relationships blossom into friendships. To hear former and current clients comment, there is only one of me, to be able to recognize myself as a unique contributor, and that is truly rewarding. So going back to the original question of what a strong ally looks like, to me, it's a stable force. It's someone who constantly has your back and guides you when necessary. And that's what I'm trying to do for others. As I have not had that experience myself, I think it's important for me to give back to those that are building their careers after us. Life is full of change, doubt, and uncertainty, and it's a good thing. Change is the only constant that drives us forward. I think a determining factor and the biggest impact that a strong ally can have on anyone is participating in that process of nurturing confidence in their peers, mentees, or coworkers. And above all, showing that kindness is true display of emotional maturity. And we can all benefit from a little bit more of that.
Thank you so much, Zoya, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Anna, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, I'm AJ Romanelli. I'm currently based in Dallas, Texas. I joined Endava as part of the Level acquisition, so I've worked for Endava for about a year and a half now. Prior to that, I worked at another technology company in implementation and also as a product manager. And when I came over to Endava, I worked in product for just a little bit, and now I am a program manager for our website redesign. I grew up in Coudersport, Pennsylvania, which is an itty-bitty town where there are more deer than people. And I've lived all over the place, notably in Washington, D.C., prior to coming to Dallas about 9 years ago. And I have 2 dogs that keep me busy. I have a wonderful husband, and we do a lot of biking and flying and camping and all sorts of outdoor adventures.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey thus far. Anna, in your opinion, what is performative allyship, and how can one avoid becoming a performative ally?
Performative allyship versus real allyship is essentially the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is saying, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And empathy is actually feeling those emotions and that experience. I majored in psychology, and oftentimes folks are cautioned against empathy because it can mean the difference between helping someone put on their oxygen mask before securing yours, and therefore rendering yourself less useful. However, when speaking up for those that don't have a standing or the voice that you do, I don't believe we will ever be able to move the needle without being fully empathetic. I'm struck by how many conversations I've had with people who mean very well and want to do right by others that start with, if I imagine this experience if I was African American, or I was a non-native speaker, or a pregnant woman, or someone who's hearing impaired, and immediately they understand that they could have done better. And I just hope in the future that they will truly put themselves in their shoes and hopefully engage them in conversations. That brings me to my next point, that full allyship means letting others have a say and a space at a table to be heard and to listen ostentatiously, or listen with the same intent with which you want to be heard, and amplifying the thoughts and feelings of those around you that you don't believe are being heard or aren't being heard appropriately, while giving them the appropriate credit. Allyship isn't easy, it takes a lot of intentionality, but I think anything worth doing is worth doing with intentionality.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name is Claudia Kenny, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have been with Endava for about 1.5 years now, since being contacted by a recruiter for a legal counsel position that was open at the time. I am now currently serving as Endava's Senior Legal Counsel for the Americas. I consider myself from Florida since I spent most of my life there, but as a child I lived in many different places. I was born and lived in Puerto Rico, and from there lived in various cities in New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Florida. Most people usually assume that I'm from a military family, but I was not. My father's career just took us many places. Despite moving a lot from a very young age, I was a competitive swimmer. I even made it so far as the Olympic trials. But then when I went to high school, I decided I liked to party more than train. Fortunately, I made it through my adolescent adventures without too much damage, and was able to go to the University of Miami and graduate with a degree in business, majoring in finance. Since I tend to do things out of order, or what my parents used to say was the hard way, I started my family right out of college and worked in business for a while before I decided to go to law school. It took me a little longer to get through law school since I had 2 young kids. But at 30, I finally graduated and started my career as a lawyer. Now, fast forwarding to the present, I stay very busy with my 2 kids who are now 17 and 19, plus my 4 stepchildren who are 19, 17, 14, and 10. It's never quiet at my household.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey this far. Claudia, what advice would you give to a leader who is trying to become a better ally and or sponsor?
If I would have been asked this question before coming to Endava, I absolutely would not have any idea how to answer it. It wasn't until I came here that I had ever really experienced allyship in my career, at least not in the way that I experience it now. By that I mean I have had 2 people, I would say, maybe 1 or 2, in previous positions that I believe were allies in the sense of helping me and being supportive early in my career. But I don't believe it was ever looked at in a positive light. Sort of an every person for themselves kind of mentality that no amount of team bonding exercises could really overcome. At Endava, it's more like a culture where the mentality of allyship and supporting others seems present and contagious. It appears to me like it's global and it extends across all disciplines. As a legal team member, I get to work with so many people at Endava across all levels and all disciplines. And I see and feel this supportive culture no matter who I'm working with. It makes me want to have the same impact on anyone who works with me. So to that effect, it's kind of contagious. And I think my advice to others trying to be better allies is that when you're stressed or overwhelmed, to remember that this supportive culture we have at Endava exists, and it's also there for you. Even leaders need to lean on their own allies. I think by doing so, you actually empower yourself
and those around you to perpetuate the culture for others.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava, and we wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us on this podcast series and for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship in the workplace. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, my name is Amanda Colis. I reside in Norwalk, Connecticut. I am a delivery partner in the North America Retail Banking AGU. My journey to Endava started with a friend I met at Women in Payments, which is an external affiliation that I work with. And at the time, I was working at a large organization where I felt like a number. And so when the opportunity to work with a firm that focused on ideas and creative solutions versus rules and legacy processes came about, I jumped at it. I'm a payment professional with over 15 years experience in strategy, finance, and client development. I like to call myself a game changer or an influencer. And the result of that is because I love to mentor. I love to speak and host workshops on professional development. I'm also proud to say I'm a global mentor for women in payments. I've actually been recently selected to be Money 2020's Amplify cohort, which is a development group that Money 2020 started for founders and minority executives. And then recently, I've been named 40 under 40 for payments with ETA, which is an electronic transaction association. And I think about all of these, things within my journey. And I'm a result of the women and men who poured into me in terms of my career journey. I'm proud to say I am Haitian descent, and I'm a teacher of life. In fact, my leadership style is more reflective as to teach, to nurture, to identify the greatness within the groups that I work with. So, folks that are on my project team know that. I do take that personal touch in terms of how I interact with them, and I do appreciate sitting in that role. And so at home, I'm a mom of two mini versions of my husband and I. We have Gavin, who is 11, turning on 12 in May, and then my daughter Nyla, who's 9 and will be 10 in August. And then we have our mini Yorkie Poo Luna, who actually turns 2 at the end of the month, who has actually been my dedicated permanent work from home mate. When I think of the word allyship, I immediately think about our organization. Endava is not only a superior organization in IT technology, but it isn't a hidden fact that there are a few numbers of women delivery partners and delivery managers compared to the men that we have here. But when I think of allyship, to me, it looks like a form of support when one needs an ear, one needs an eye, like eyes to be seen. And I'm fortunate to work with amazing leaders who, yes, are the majority of men, but allow me the space to be confident in my voice within the organization, meaning I am accepted and I'm respected in my working style, which then results in my confidence in my approach, in how I strategize my deals with clients, how I lead my project teams, and how I influence the next round of delivery managers and partners of women leaders within the organization. And so that is much very important to me, and was one of the factors of moving over to Endava. I felt a sense of placement where I can, be able to use my voice to impact change creatively with our clients, and then impact change within the organization in terms of our project teams.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your perspective on allyship and sponsorship and its impact in the workplace. We've really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your journey at Endava. We wish you nothing but the best as you continue to grow in your career. A big thank you to all of our podcast guests and listeners. We appreciate all the continued support and advocacy from our fellow allies and sponsors, and we hope this series helped illuminate some of the amazing things many of our leaders are already doing, as well as provided new takeaways on how we can all be better allies and sponsors, continuing to strive to make Endava a truly inclusive workplace for all. Thank you, everyone.